And again, volumetric lights are like light beams that you see on a foggy night, or God rays that you'll see early morning or mid-morning type thing, shining through trees. We're going to leave it on because I think I will put God rays in our final render. Again, like I was discussing yesterday with Galen, because Galen's working with volumetric lights for some of his spotlights. You don't necessarily need to do it in the 3D program. You can do it in post-production in, say, Photoshop or After Effects or Premiere, whatever you're working with. Generally, usually it might be quicker to do it post-production than do it in the render. But because this is a proper atmospheric rendering engine, we're going to let View do it for us. So I'm going to leave volumetric turned on. So we have our hero trees brought in. Just getting back to whether I want to move one of them, the one on the left-hand side or not. I'm going to pull it in a little. We've saved our file, so if I don't like it, no big deal. I'm going to pull it in a little bit more though and have a look. Just going to pull into my scene a bit closer here. Again, I just want to avoid covering up too much of the model in the background. I may pull the tree down a little bit as well. Again, because I don't want to cover up too many of those flowers that we put on those hills in the background. Now you see I am starting to cover up a bit of my model, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to scale my tree up. And we're going to scale it up a bit more. Again, as Bob Ross would say, it's your world, do what you want. If you want to make it smaller or bigger, then do it. Again, no, I really want to try and avoid covering up those flowers in the background too much. I'm going to pull into my side viewport here and have a look. The trees could still be bigger than that anyway. Generally, in relation to the terrace, you don't have to make them correct. It's whatever looks good in your render, but in relation to the terrace, they still could be bigger, really. Again, I'm just going to check my last render here and do a comparison. We're seeing more of the tree trunk here than what we had in the original render. We are starting to cover up the dome, which is a bit of an annoyance. We may be able to still get away with it, even because we're going to create a second camera and we're going to pull up really close to the terrace here. So let's do another quick render here. I'll see just how much it is, including that dome in the background. Again, I have these worries because I put this model on Cornucopia's website for sale, and they have pretty strict rules as to what you're allowed to do and what you shouldn't do. So if I don't follow their rules for the creation of my renders, my beauty renders, then they can get a bit narky. So, but if you're just creating the render for yourself, you don't have to worry about these sort of things as far as covering up the model in the background goes. Mind you, if you spend a lot of time creating whatever it is you've got in the background, you don't want to cover it up completely. So, And again, remember guys, this render that it's doing is it's called a preview quality render. It's very low quality rendering. We're only using it so that we can get a fast render to see what our environment looks like before we do a higher resolution render. My main concerns with the model in the background is I don't really want to cover up the angels because they're a nice feature for the model, so I want to make sure that they really don't get covered up. Now the dome, if it's partially covered, it should be okay, as long as we can still make out it's a dome in the background. I'm already liking pulling the model in and seeing more of that tree trunk there in the on the left hand side looks better. It was just a bit too far out, I think. You wanted to see that there was a tree there. And again, when we do our third render, so we're going to be doing this render, the square render, which is just to the model. We're going to be creating a second camera where we pull right up close to the model, another square render. And then I'm going to do a third render where we're pulled back at like we are here, but it's more of a rectangular render, so a 2560 by 1440 render, and we'll see more of the trees then. These square ones though are for the website for Cornucopia 3D. The rectangular render will be one that I use for my website. So, or if you want to put it at like if I wanted to put it as a background on my monitor or something, I always like to create a rectangular render. I generally would never recommend you do a square render. Again, this is just because of Eon Cornucopia's rules for their stuff on their website. So just for you people thinking, why is he doing a square render? Yeah, I wouldn't recommend you do square renders on anything. It's a restriction that Eon Cornucopia place on me. But I will be doing a rectangular render as well. And again, remember guys, when the background goes in, it's going to really change the look of the scene quite dramatically. Like I said yesterday, you really will be surprised how much adding a background can really change the look of the scene. As well as color correction, because again, the render we get from raw from Eon View here is, I would never use the raw render. I'm always going to do color correction in Photoshop. You'll see me do that when I go through it all. Thanks for popping in, Heather. Thanks for watching the stream. See you later. Have a safe trip home. And yeah, again, and thanks for showing your work to everybody. Getting back to our next project though, after this one, what Sniper Echo suggested might be a good idea, instead of maybe taking this model, which you're all probably getting sick of looking at now, this garden terrace into Unreal, I might take that Art Deco building fly-through that you saw in the UDK version of Unreal, recreate that in the Unreal Engine 4. You guys let me know which you prefer to see. I could either take this garden terrace into the Unreal Engine and maybe we could set up another environment for it, or I can recreate that Art Deco building fly-through that you saw on my YouTube channel that used UDK convert that to Unreal Engine 4 and set it up in Unreal Engine 4. Whichever you guys would prefer to see. Or maybe we'll do both. Take a bit longer, but hey, why not? We could do a fly through of the building and then fly out to the garden terrace at the back of the building or something. But you let me know which one you prefer me to start with, whether you want me to start with the garden terrace maybe in Unreal, or start with the Art Deco building. That's the exterior and interior of the building. I'm happy to do it either way. Like I said, I'm on Twitch for you guys, so you let me know what you want to see. I just happen to be working on my own stuff while I'm on Twitch. That's really the only difference. So as far as that timeline goes, I'm guessing we may get the flowers put in the front here today. Like I said, I want to put some flowers, I think, just in the foreground. Again, that's to add in one more layer. Remember yesterday I was talking about working in layers. Get the flowers in the foreground, and then next week we will put the background in, and then we will start doing some high quality renders. I think that's probably a good plan of action. So today, hopefully before I finish the stream, I'll get some flowers in the foreground. We'll do another preview quality render here. Then next week, on Monday next week when I come back, we will place a background behind the garden terrace. And then we can start doing some high quality renders to have a look at how everything is coming together. Before we do a final broadcast quality render and take it into Photoshop to do some color correction on. You like the fly-through idea of the Art Deco building? Okay. Yeah. Let's do that then. If I can't get any photographs taken for photogrammetry to show you guys between now and when we finish this project, then the next project I'll be working on will be using the new Unreal Engine 4. I'll take that Art Deco building you saw that fly through of just earlier. I'll recreate that using Unreal Engine 4. So it'll be an Art Deco building with an Art Deco interior. We'll recreate it in the new version of the engine, and we'll see what the lighting is, how the lighting has changed from Unreal version 3 to Unreal version 4. The new version 4 of Unreal. Because I'm looking forward to jumping back into Unreal using the engine. I really do like the Unreal Engine. Like I said, I've done work with it before. So I'm looking forward to doing some work with the new version 4 of the engine. So we'll do that. Next project after this one will be an Art Deco building fly-through exterior and interior using the Unreal Engine. Because we've almost finished this one. Like I said, we'll probably get the flowers in the foreground done today, placed today. On Monday when I come back, I'll get the background placed in. That shouldn't take very long at all. We'll do a couple of high quality renders to check everything, set up a second camera. Again, that shouldn't take long. It's just moving a camera basically. Then we can do our final quality renders and take it into Photoshop to do some color correction on before we call the project done. But I really do want to show you guys how to do color correction in Photoshop. It's an important step in any design that any rendering you're doing. Color correction is really an important thing to be doing. You should never really be taking your render directly raw from whatever program you're creating your render in and giving it to a client raw. You should always do color correction on it, because you're always going to come up with a nicer looking image. So it's a really important thing to do, and it's all design studios will do it. They will never ever generally use a raw render to show a client. They will always color correct it. So I want to show you guys the procedure that I use to do color correction in Photoshop, particularly when it comes to color correcting images you've created in Eon View. But the process will apply to not just to View, but to anything that you've created, whether it's renders from V-Ray or Blender renders, whatever you're working with. You always do color correction in Photoshop. Okay, now I just want to jump between these two renders here to check the tree that we moved over slightly. You know, now that I'm looking at between the two, I think a halfway between these two is probably better. I think that tree's moved over too far. I'm going to pull it back a little bit, but I don't want it back as far as the initial render there. So I think... I know it's harder for you guys to see too, but because it's such a low quality render, but the shadowing in the second one, after us softening the shadows, if you look in the background particularly, say through here, you'll see that the shadows are looking a little softer. Again, it's going to be really hard to tell because the quality of the render is so low. But yeah, I don't want the tree over that far. I'm going to move it back to halfway between there and there. Let's remove that render. Let's select our tree, left hand side tree. And I'm just going to move it over slightly, move it back slightly again. Maybe like that. So we still see a bit of the trunk in the image there. We're starting to see a bit more of the dome in the background. Before I do another test render though, let's pull in some flowers so that we can put in the foreground. So let's load up an object here. You remember I created these little flower bunches that we used in the background on those two hills? We can either use that one or we can use this one. Which one will look better, I wonder? Let's pull in this one. Instead of me loading it up, because it's already loaded in the scene. Sniper Wrecker says he's seen people take a render from UE4 into Photoshop and make changes and then take those changes and pipe it back into post-process volume in UE4. Again, so you can get the environment. Yeah, no, that's right. UE4 have LUT color correction as well, which is something I generally use. If you're not sure what that is, look up LUT on Google, color correction LUT. That's built into the Unreal Engine, and I generally will use that as well to do some color correction in real time. I'm not familiar with this, people taking it into Photoshop to make changes and then piping it back. I may have to look up on that, but I do certainly use LUT color correction, LUT. And I will be using it in Unreal when I create that Art Deco building. Now, I want to select my flowers in the background here so I can copy them to the foreground. My trees are in the way, so again I'm just going to hide those trees for a moment so I can see my flower bunches here. I'm going to select one of them and copy it and paste it, and we're going to move it to the foreground. So I'm going to move it there temporarily because I want to move it into one of our hero tree layers here. Okay, so remember we always want to keep ourselves organized here, good housekeeping and all that sort of thing. Let's turn our trees back on. And let's position, let's position our flowers here. Now we want them to be sunk into the terrain a little bit more. Again, I'm eyeballing it here in the camera viewport. I'm moving it in the top viewport, but always looking in the camera viewport. I'm always positioning my objects in relation to how they look in the camera. I'm just going to deselect that for a moment. I want to see what it looks like in the scene here. Okay, I'm going to pull them further back toward the tree. Or more toward that rock in the background. And again, remember, like I've been saying guys, always keep proportions. You want to make sure everything stays balanced. So even though we can't see the other side of the path in our render, we are going to see it when I do a more of a rectangular render. So in keeping with that proportional thing, I'm going to make a copy of this and I'm going to move it over to the other side as well. Again, so even though you can't see it in the camera that we're rendering out, when we do a rectangular render, you are going to see it. So let's take care of that now and keep our scene balanced. Again, I'm looking in the camera viewport while I'm moving this. I'm going to move this one further back. I'm not going to keep it directly in line with the one in the foreground. But I certainly want to make sure it's there to keep the balance in the scene. I'm also going to move it further in, I think. So again, like I said, you can see here in our camera, our render, we're not going to be seeing that at all. But when we do our rectangular render, we are going to start seeing more of the tree and the flowers here. And to keep things balanced, we have to add them over there. Again, I'm going to make one more copy and I'm going to put more flowers back in here. Again, you can't see it in our main render, but when we do a larger rectangular render, you will see it. So let's take care of that problem now so that when we change our camera, we don't have to worry about moving things around. Just like that. And I'm not sure how it shows up on stream, whether you can actually see through that opaque side panel, but the flowers just continue out a bit more. Again, it keeps balance in the image. If we were going to be creating a wider render out past the edge here, we would create another copy of that to the other side here, again to keep the balance, but we're never going to really go past that edge, so we won't worry about it here. So we've moved our tree further out again, so halfway between where it originally was and where I moved it to the last time I did a render, and we've also put some flowers in the scene. Again though, the only way we're going to get a proper idea of whether the placement is correct is to do another quick render, so let's do that now. Sniper Echo says that LUT is basically the difference between the original image and the modified version of the image. It is, but with LUT you actually create a color, like a color map for it. So you can change the color of whatever is being rendered in real time in Unreal using a LUT color map. And the color map you can create in Photoshop, and that will alter the colors that the engine renders on screen as you move around your scene. So you're right, it is a difference between the original image and a modified version of the image, but you're modifying the original image based on a specific set of colors that you define in Photoshop. So you're creating a LUT color map, I guess you'd call it, that you decide you want the scene to look like, and you change the colors in real time in the Unreal Engine based on that LUT. So you're right, it alters the colours, but you control what colours and how it gets altered using a LUT. So we'll look at all of that as well when we start working with the Unreal Engine. I like that idea myself of taking that Art Deco building and recreating it in the new version of the engine. It's been a while since I've worked with that model, so I'd like to see what it looks like in the new version with the new lighting in Unreal. And it's something a bit different for me because I've been working on this garden terrace for quite a while. But like I said, in the end, after we've done the Art Deco building, we can always then bring the garden terrace in and put it in the background of the building. We'll see how we go. But by then, hopefully, I should have had enough time and the weather should be good enough for me to take some photographs so I can show you some photogrammetry stuff. Again though, like I said guys, you can see here we can't see our second flowers over here in this camera viewport, but we move them over there to keep balance in our scene because we are going to be creating a rectangular render at some stage as well. So, and we will see them then. Again, I wanted to add flowers in the foreground because it adds another layer to the scene. The more layers you add to a scene, the more depth you give the scene, and therefore the more interesting the render will become. Well, now you know it's full of luck. There you go, Snow Perfect. I'm glad I could be of help. Again, the shadowing that you see the trees throwing on the angels and the terrace in the background are really going to help us set up our God rays when we get View to start rendering in God rays. In order to create a God ray, you have to have something including the sun. So, because a God ray is basically sunlight, it's filtered through an object, usually trees. So, having that shadow falling back on our garden terrace is really going to help us set up some interesting God rays when we render them in. And God rays will suit the scene because, you know, we've got angels in the background. It might be a bit cliche, but it'll suit the scene. Nothing wrong with being cliche. I like the fact that we've moved our tree back out again. I always get confused with the camera because it mirrors everything. We've moved it over again, halfway between where it was and where the second time we rendered it. I just wanted to see a bit more of the trunk in the render, add a bit more interest, and again to add more balance. Now, we're getting back to what I was talking about with you guys, always making sure that your scenes are balanced. You don't have too much going on one side and not enough on the other. Having this trunk showing in the corner here will help balance up the image. So you have the detail there, and now we've got the flower detail here. That balances up the image. Again, remember guys, this is a low quality render. We still have to play with our lighting slightly, and the colors are going to be changed through color correction when we take the final image into Photoshop. So, and also when we add the background, it's going to quite dramatically change the look of the image. I'm not going to start adjusting the lighting until I have the background in, which is the last thing we need to do. So once the background goes in, I'll adjust the lighting properly. Then we'll do a final quality render. We'll create a second camera closer to the garden terrace and do another render. We'll go back to this camera and change our camera settings so that we can do a rectangular render. We'll take those 3 renders into Photoshop and we'll do color correction on them. The reason we'll do it with the 3 renders is it's easier to do the color correction on 3 images at the same time. Yeah, we'll make a nice desktop wallpaper, I guess. You see my desktop wallpaper at the moment, it's just like black leaves with some blue blobs on them. I like to keep my background pretty clean. I find if I have an image like this on my wall as my wallpaper, I tend to lose my icons, so I like to keep it pretty dark and simple. I know a friend of mine likes to go with this type of thing, or waterfalls in the background. Personal preference, I guess. But for me, if I had this as my wallpaper, because I put icons on my desktop, I'd lose the icons half the time. I wouldn't know where they were. So I keep a very plain sort of background. But I know that putting icons on your desktop is sort of like a dying art now that Windows 10 has its start menu. It's not really necessary to put icons on your desktop anymore. I just do it with my shortcuts to my different hard drives, basically. Navarika says he does that also. You can have a busy wallpaper but always switch to a plain one for when you're working. Yeah, that's true. I got 2 monitors too actually, so I could have a busy wallpaper on one side and a plain one on my main screen. I must say, I have used some of my own renders before as my background, so I'm not saying I have never done it. And all the only icons I tend to keep on my desktop now, like I said, are shortcuts to my different hard drives, because I've got 5 or 6 different hard drives on my computer that I, save to use different hard drives for different projects. But that's really the only shortcuts I guess I keep on my desktop now. Now that Windows Start menu is there and I can access shortcuts to my regularly used programs like Photoshop and Max and stuff. You do see though how adding more objects slows your render down, and we're using a preview quality render here, so next week when we start rendering some final images, it's going to start taking quite a long time to do the render, a lot longer than it is now. What I'm going to do for you guys is, once we've finished setting up the scene here, I want to show you guys a higher quality render than what you're seeing here in this preview quality. So in View's render dialog up here, when you set your render, you've got preview quality, what they call final quality, which is not really final quality, it's just what they call it, broadcast, and then superior. We're working in preview quality. Next week when we put the background in, I'll render out final quality to show you guys what the image properly looks like. After the stream is finished overnight, I will render out broadcast quality, and it's broadcast quality that we'll be taking into Photoshop to do the color correction on. So you won't see broadcast quality until I start working in Photoshop, because it'll take too long. It'll take probably, generally my renders take about 2 hours on broadcast quality. So that would be the entire stream looking at something rendering out, which is pretty boring. And I can't talk about things for 2 hours if I'm not working. So next week when we put the background in, I'll render out in final quality so that you guys can get a better idea of exactly what the render looks like. Overnight I'll render out in broadcast quality, so the next day when I start streaming again, you guys will see the image in Photoshop in broadcast quality. So just to give you guys more of an immediate look at what the render is like while I'm on stream. I'll work in final quality, but I always work in broadcast quality for the final image. Just to explain what will be going on. Now you see this shadowing that's happening here on these flowers? That's very odd. I've got to work out what's going on there. It shouldn't be doing that. Now it's either a problem with the texture on the actual flower petals, and it's the white flowers in the image. It's either that or it's a really weird shadow effect happening. Again though, I'm going to ignore that for the moment, because I want to look at my tree positioning here. So that was too far in. We moved the tree back over slightly, and I prefer that. It shows a bit more of the dome and helps to balance up that corner with that corner. I'm just going to have a quick look at those flowers though. Like I said, I want to know what's going on. And it's actually in the white flower itself. It's this flower here, white flowers, which shouldn't be happening because I think it's one of View's flowers. I'll have to look at that off stream, I think, find out why it's behaving like that, because this isn't one of my objects, it's one of View's objects, one of their own flowering objects. I don't really have access to the materials that it uses because I didn't create the object. It could just be a really weird artifact that's happening with the shadowing. It's either a problem with the material or a problem with the shadowing. I can't see why how shadowing could be affecting that, because everything else is lit properly. looking at that, my initial conclusion is that it's a problem with Vue's material, that whoever created that plant, that flower, did something incorrect on the material for it. So again, I'm going to have to look at that. I'll do it off stream though. I'm going to have to try and look at it. Like I said, I didn't create the flower, so I don't really have access to the material. I may have to swap those flowers out with something else if I can't work out what's going on there. If it was a flower that I'd created myself, then I'd have access to the material, but because that's one that comes with Vue, I can't really control that. Not really. I'll look at it after the stream though. And if worst comes to worst, we'll swap it out with something else, with another flower, either one that I create that I know will render correctly, or something else. But it's giving you guys an idea of how the render is coming together, what the scene is going to look like, even in this really low quality preview quality render. Do bear in mind, once we put our background in, it really will change the feel of the scene quite a bit, depending on what image we use for the background. Again, I will be using an image here because it's a small enough area that I can get away with using an image. Using an image will help speed up our render, our final quality renders, broadcast quality renders, and it'll give you a better result anyway. There are a couple of things that I'll show you next week when we pull the background image in that you have to set to make sure that it renders correctly. Now, I know a lot of people would probably say, well, if you're going to put a background in, what, you're just going to render it like that and then put the background in Photoshop? That's an option, you could do that. I'm not going to be doing it that way. I'm going to show you the way that I do it again in Vue, whereas I'm going to pull in a background image into the program here. And I do that so I can get the positioning correct. I'm not going to be doing it in post-production in Photoshop, I'm going to be doing it in real time here in the viewport. I'll show you that though next week when we come back to finish up the layout for the scene here. Because once I fix the problem with the flowers here in the foreground, really all we have left to do is add the background. And then we can start doing our high quality render before we take it into Photoshop to do the color correction. So I'll show you the background and how I set it up next week when I come back on Monday. But I guess we should leave it there for today, guys. I do want to thank you guys for hanging out with me and for watching the stream. I really do appreciate it when you guys are here and watching me on Twitch. So thank you for that. Thank you guys that popped into chat, and thank you Sniper Echo. It's always great to chat to talk to you guys in chat. Remember guys, if you're not sure when I'm live, I always post 15 minutes before I go live to my Twitter account at PhilDoes3D. My schedule doesn't change though. I always stream on a Monday, a Tuesday and a Wednesday at 5 PM Pacific time in the United States. That'll vary for wherever else you are in the world. But it's always 5 PM in the US on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Yeah, like I said though, if you're not sure, keep an eye on my Twitter page. I will post always 15 minutes before I actually go live. So keep an eye on Twitter if you're not sure. Like I said, I do want to thank you guys for watching and for being here. Thank you guys in chat. Thank you Sniper Echo for being here as well. And hopefully I will see you guys on Monday next week and we will finish setting up this scene here. All we really have left to do is to add that background. I'm going to show you guys that next week. So yeah, I'll be back on Monday next week. You guys have a good weekend. I hope you enjoy your weekend. I'll be back on Monday and hopefully I'll see you guys then. Take care guys.